that have come up. You could range, you know, if we talked about the footprint of the main house right now is 3,500 square feet. And if I understood the comment earlier this evening that the new library that's in the park would have to fit within the footprint of the main house, it suggests a pretty tall library would have to be built in order to accommodate 9,800 or 11,000 square feet. The needs assessment document really was a driver in terms of the size figure by incorporating some unincorporated area along with Atherton area and coming up with 16,000 potential resident users of that library compared to 7,000 Atherton residents. So we have a library size that's roughly twice, being recommended roughly twice that which would be based strictly upon Atherton residents. However, the documents stress that the library use is going to be primarily for Atherton residents. So to use 11,000, use 9,800. There's another reference in the document about 15,000 square feet. Or should we use 6,000 to 6,500, which would be a library size for Atherton? I think the size of the library is going to have a big effect in terms of the value of the environmental document that's produced. And the sites to be evaluated, I think that's going to be very important, that all viable sites are actually looked at. I'm concerned about the 5 sites that are mentioned in the document itself. I don't think that's adequate. There are a lot of other things about the document. It's very heavily, I think, pointed towards the idea of the library being in the park. There's they talk about task B, which involves traffic and parking and a lot of those things as being completed, which it has not, because they haven't taken into account other sites. That's, I think, again, shows that lack of real due diligence in terms of preparation of the document. Talk about in the revised traffic analysis study that was done. It's kind of interesting. If they had a revised study in September where they revised it down from 12,000 square foot library to 11,000 square foot library and said, okay, because we have this little smaller library, we're going to have a little less traffic and it will be a little less need for parking and so forth. But however, peak demand is, on a typical day, is expected to utilize all available parking spaces.
That's not true.
It's in the revised document, so you need to, please, I am talking right now. Point of order.
You have to hold it.
I refer to the September 2011 revised traffic study, and I've quoted exactly what is in the study. So there are a number of things that I find disturbing in terms of the scoping here, but I certainly think there should be an environmental study undertaken.
Okay, I would just mention at this stage that when Councilman Whitmer brought up the fact at the last council meeting that he was voting on the basis that the size of the library would not utilize any more green space than the present main house, plus all of the concrete and the other brickwork and everything else. I think we wanted to make it clear that's the size he was talking about. I believe that's the case.
I don't think that was the answer I got earlier this evening, Mr. Mayor.
Well, I believe that's the case. Councilmember Whitmer can also confirm that.
There was, I think when we had the meeting in October, I'd mentioned that I measured the space they had out there. It was about 10,000 square foot space around the house. And it's essentially the space and a little bit of the patio. So yes, the patio, a little bit of the patio is included. It's about 10,000 square feet.
All right, thanks. If there are no other comments,
Okay, I do have a comment, and then I'd like to make a motion. The environmental study has been something that was not something that we had to do. The consultant said a negative declaration would be sufficient. It was because of the public outcry that we decided to go ahead on the environmental committee, on the library committee, and recommend that we do an environmental impact report in order to give the public an opportunity over a period of months to be able to forward their comments orally and in writing and have them responded to in writing in a report. And we felt that it was worth the additional cost so that people knew that they were being listened to and could see that their comments were being addressed in a report as to what was the best environmental site. It's also important for us to know, and it's also important if you were ever to conduct a survey for the people of the town to understand what is environmentally the most sound site. I would like to know that. What is the best environmental location for this? In the size of the library, yes, it does in the report posit the possibility of up to 15,000 feet. There's no way, and Neil Martin will confirm this, that it's going to be 15,000 feet. It's never been addressed. We were all shocked when he put that in. And he said that from a planning perspective, what you want to do is you want to put in the worst possible case scenario, because you want to test it in the most rigid manner possible. You want to say, if it could be bigger than anyone possibly desired, would it still meet the environmental tests we're going to subject it to? And that's why that number is in there. With regard to the parking and the traffic, there is no way on earth that those issues have been resolved yet. And to the extent that you asked the question with regard to traffic, privately of Neil Martin and the consultants and Jerry, and you received a letter back from them, which by the way cost us an additional approximately $1,000. It was clear in the response that things like the salt works being developed and the projects that Menlo Park is envisioning, which have already been considered in the preliminary analysis, will undoubtedly be considered further as they go forward with the EIR. They have to be, they should be, they will be. Parking is not something that is normally considered. However, it will be. We've asked that they do consider it as part of the environmental impact process because it's so important to the people of this town that we want it to be considered. And we thought it should be looked at on a number of different occasions, not just one more occasion, but from every perspective imaginable, so that those parking numbers are numbers that the community can rely upon during various events that the Dames hold, various weddings, different times of year. And so we've asked that that be looked at. And so with that in mind, I think an environmental study is a very important thing to do. And I think it could set a lot of our minds at ease. And I would like to direct staff to proceed with the preparation of an environmental impact report for the Atherton Library project. And I think that's the first motion I'd like to make.
I will second. All in favor? Aye.
Opposed. And
What was your vote?
I voted aye.
And with regard to that, I would like there to be an approval of the First Amendment to the Professional Services Agreement with LSA Associates for preparation of a focused environmental impact report, which needn't include, by the way, just those sites they've referred to, but other sites if indeed they are raised during the scoping session or at any time thereafter.
I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is our discussion on the continuation of events located at Oakwood Farm Park through the 2/12 2000 calendar year. And we were going to have a report on this from the staff, revenue versus direct cost. Steve?
Evening, Mayor and Council. At the October 19th, 2011 council meeting, staff was asked for direction from the council regarding continuation of booking events at the park for the 2012 calendar year. Council at that meeting, that October meeting, directed staff to report to them the direct costs associated with performing these events. I believe you used the term overhead, but as we got into this report, we thought direct costs was perhaps a better word. First thing we had to do was we had to assume what we're going to call a park event. There's a lot of things that happen here in the park. There's daily classes, there's dog classes that take place, there's corporate meetings, there's meetings such as this. So what are we considering an event here in the park that we're going to be continuing for 2012? And the assumptions we made were events would be considered weddings, social events such as birthday parties, memorial services, bar mitzvahs, graduations, etc., as well as corporate meetings and seminars that take place mostly during the week. The things that we did not consider events were meetings that take place such as this, park and recreation meetings, dames, foundation meetings, and the like. So just so you're clear what the events are and are not, those are the assumptions we made. We then did a pretty detailed cost analysis where we took everything from utility bills and broke them down to see, just because we didn't run an event in the pavilion, there would still be costs annually associated with that. So we removed everything but the costs that would be applied for carrying on these events. So in other words, the power that's used in the pavilion to run these lights at night. Well, not on this event, but if it was a wedding. And we came up with some costs. We also put in a price for labor, because when events are run here in the park, someone, even though they might not be here for the event planner would take care of actually running the event. But there's work that needs to be done prior to the events happening, such as painting walls, cleaning carpets, taking care of the immediate gardens around the pavilion that have to be in pristine shape to hold such an event. And what we came out with, so those were the costs that were associated. We looked at revenues for the past 4 years. We took an average, kind of rounded them up to the nearest dollar, and those came to around $260,000 in revenue. And if you look at the fiscal impact of that, if we had a $260,000 year, that we'd say we're splitting that with our event planner, which is currently the case. If we decided to go 2012, we would put that out to bid. We could perhaps even do better than 50%. It's possible, but that's the scenario we looked at, which would bring us 130,000 of that 260. Our direct expenses would be $38,500, which would give us a net revenue of approximately $91,500. That's a big change in what's happened in the past. Most of that has to do with the new way the town's running nowadays. We're contracting these services out, and those service prices at this current time are much less expensive than they were in the past. So I'm here to answer any questions. Like I said, we are looking for council's direction. Yes?
Go ahead, Kathy.
I think last time I was the one who said that I really wanted to know what the costs were, and because how could we possibly determine whether to go forward? Let me step back a minute. The real reason that we decided to stop events at the park was because this was a money-losing proposition. And we still didn't know a month ago whether or not this was going to bring forward any income to the park. I think it was estimated at around $68,000 or so in our report. And when we asked our finance director, Louise Ho, who we all have high regard for, whether or not, given the costs of capital overhead as well as direct costs, whether or not there was any indication that things would change and we would end up with a positive revenue stream from these rentals. She indicated it could be 15 or 30%, or it could be nothing, but she wasn't sure. That's my recollection. We now have in front of us an analysis which shows revenues from different years, but as regards costs, it doesn't really show us what the costs were in different years. All it shows us are these numbers. And I don't know where these numbers came from. They seem to be very general. I don't know what the year breakdown is. We have revenue breakdown in accordance with years. But where are the costs broken down? I find it very hard to believe that the carpets, the air conditioning, the glass, the locks in this building alone were $3,000 in 1 year. I know that in the police department, when they had a problem with their air conditioning, it was a couple $1,000s. All you need is one problem, a little problem with your air conditioning, and it can be very costly. I'm not saying that necessarily occurred here, but where did these numbers come from? Where is the breakdown by year as to what the actual costs were? Because without that legitimacy, I don't know what these numbers are. And I don't know what credence to give them in terms of determining whether or not this is going to continue to cost the town money. And that's my real concern about rentals.
Did you take into account depreciation, Steve, in any way?
No, we did not. We looked at the price for a single year, looking back a single year in costs. So as far as costs went, we went back 1 year for the past 12 months, July through June, and looked at the costs for that year and brought them in to what it would cost to run those events in 2012.
But we have to take depreciation into account, and on a pro rata basis, charge the events. Some portion of that, if a refrigerator breaks down in here, we gotta replace it. If windows get broken, we gotta replace it. So somewhere, depreciation has to be built into these costs.
Well, we do have a facility repair cost there of $3,000.
That's not depreciation.
That's true.
And when you say we, who is we? Who prepared these costs?
These were prepared with finance numbers through the Public Works Department.
So the Public Works Department really prepared them.
That's correct.
So this didn't come from the lease code.
I have some other comments which are not really associated necessarily with costs, although I'm sure they have a bearing on them. That my view simply is this. We've talked about parking in the park. We've talked about parking in the park in the library discussions about what it would do to the parking. When we have weddings and major events in the park, every parking spot is full. And especially at weekends, that means in the park that there are no parking spots available to residents. And my objection to weddings, especially at weekends, is even if they make a small amount of money for us, we should have the park open for the residents at the weekend. And the times I have checked on weddings, and also in some other events that were not even on weekdays, every parking spot was filled. I think that's totally unacceptable, and I think, as far as I'm concerned, we should eliminate weddings at weekends, and we should limit the number of people at those events, and we should consider charging on a per head basis for the people that attend these events. That way, we will open the park at the weekends to our residents. We will charge more for the events. I mean, we had 500 Google people here for who we charged $1,000. Doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So those are my comments. Any other comments?
Well, based on the comments that have been made, I'm not sure that we can make a decision. perhaps we should have a continuance on this and have to get more data. Although we are running out of time with regards to booking if we're going to have some sort of events. So,
We turned down bookings for 3 weddings today.
Yeah, so,
That's,
so I'd like to make a comment. Councilmember Whitmer, you'd heard from 2 council members. There are 2 other council members who hadn't made a comment yet. And so you're basing your decision for a continuance based on 2.
well, according
Okay.
to our rules, where any council member at any time can ask for a continuance.
No, I understand, but your rationale was based on only 2 council members making comments. Call me naive or whatever, but I like the looks of these numbers. I think looking at a net revenue projection of $91,000 for renting out these facilities to events is a good thing. And I really think that I don't think our other fellow council members are giving our staff enough credit to being able to extrapolate the costs of running the park and factoring it against the revenue stream of the new rental model. We don't have the excessive overhead of an on-staff person, and a lot of the expenses are baked into the rental amounts. And I would like to know who made the decision early on. Certainly council did not make the decision to stop taking bookings, and we have lost an entire year. Council did not make the decision to stop the bookings. And so who made that decision? I think we need to get back on the horse and start riding it again to get some revenue being generated here. And if Council Member Mayor Dobby says that weddings totally book up all the parking spaces, how in the world would we have a wedding if we had a library in the park? That would preclude all of that potential, and that is a community benefit for not only our residents but for some other residents in our neighborhood. So I've always said I think that we were charging too little for our fees to rent, and I've heard the story about the Google company party, over and over again. That's a fine example of why we need a professional booking agent. So I like this, and I'd like to get us a resolution and a motion to contract out as soon as possible to either the Bianchini's or a new vendor that we can negotiate with, and quit turning down the potential revenue generating bookings.
I again would say that we've talked again about non-Atherton residents using the library if it goes in the park. Virtually all of the weddings that we book are for non-Atherton residents. So we're not taking away from Atherton residents. I've looked at this once before, and I think it was 99% of all the weddings were for non-Atherton residents. Some of the Atherton residents did it for their friends because they got a cheaper rate at the time, but they weren't for their families' weddings.
I guess I don't see this as a rocket science problem. If we get marginal income to cover park costs, we ought to do it. Cutting out coffee and other things, pennies saved, dollars saved, are small compared to the opportunity costs here of being able to rent facilities and to ensure the efficient use of them to help defer some of the park costs. Depreciation, I don't think, should enter into this thing because you're going to have depreciation anyway. We're talking about incremental opportunity costs for generating more revenues. And I like the town's plan and how they are going about to manage these events. I'd like to see us try it. I think it's a shame that we've dilly-dallied so long already and have lost opportunity to bring in several thousands of dollars in the process.
That assumes it would bring in several thousands of dollars, and we don't have the figures that support that that's necessarily the case, because we don't really know that these figures are valid. And moreover, we don't know whether or not those weddings wouldn't cost us, we talk about 3 more weddings. If those 3 more weddings would cost us what the last 3 more weddings cost us, then I think it's a good thing we didn't have them, because we were always losing money on weddings. So bravo that we didn't have 3 more weddings, because until we really figure out what we're doing, I think it's ridiculous for us to go booking things when we don't know whether or not we're losing money. And there are additional costs beyond this that are associated with having some of these events. You can say that there's normal deterioration of a building. Absolutely. But when you have an event in here with 300 people, it's a little different when you have wine and food and they're spilling things on a carpet, even if it's cleaned. And the same goes with the grounds. You may be sick and tired of hearing about Google when it's 500 or 800 people. But when you have 500 or 800 people on that grass, which cost us a whole lot of money, and you'll see in the warrants just tonight how it cost us a whole lot more to repair it than we had even thought at the last meeting was going to cost us. When you have that many people on your turf, it's going to cost you a lot of money. That if you'd left it alone, it's wear and tear on the grounds. It requires more water, more attention, potentially more seeds, spots, digging into it. Moreover, it requires, it involves potential damage to the irrigation system. And if you look at the warrants over the last few years, as I've said repeatedly, we could have opened up a Home Depot with some of the irrigation costs we've had in parts because of the damage to the irrigation system. So this does not tell the whole picture. I don't know where these numbers are coming from. I don't know where they've been derived at. With all due respect to our public works, they're great at public works, but they are not financial people, and I don't know whether these numbers are something that can be relied upon in order to ascertain whether or not this is going to cost the people of the town money or generate. I'm all in favor of generating money, even if it's a small sum, but I'm not in favor of the townspeople picking up the cost of these events.
I would like to table this motion until we can have a better review of the costs.
Second.
All in favor?
Comments?
Public comments, go ahead.
Charles Marsala, 33 Emily. I was involved with this for about 10 years, from the Park and Rec through Council. And at one point, 10 years ago, the idea, maybe even 12, was to open this building up so that you could rent it during the winter. Because the factor was that it was probably losing money because you could only do weddings during the summer months, and you were missing out on the seasonal winter activity to get the money up. And then, obviously, Jean Cardona's was a very expensive salary to have. So I could easily see that with her gone, this becomes very profitable, because you wipe out whatever, $120,000 is gone out of the cost of that's assigned to weddings, and it would, looking at it from 30,000 feet, I don't know what it costs now for what do you get, 3,500 or is it 3,000?
Yeah, some as high as 5,000.
$5,000. That has to be profitable to say you can rent this. If you get $5,000 for renting this room out for a couple hours, there's not going to be $5,000 worth of damage done to the park. So even though I would say your numbers have to be right, because it can't be $5,000 worth of damage that's done. And if you can pick up that incremental money, $15,000 on 3 weddings would have been $15,000. And I know this carpet that Jean put in and the painting that we've done, the building had been maybe 30 years old before it depreciated. So the carpet's going to last for 30 years, and there's going to be a little bit of wear and tear from the wedding, but it's going to be minor. And you can pick up that money. The other issue is whether or not you want people here. And that's a separate topic, I believe. But if you need it for the finances, and if we're low on cost and we need more money to operate the park, which I believe is why weddings had started, was simply to make some money, and $100,000 goes a long way to buying a lot of the seed and everything else that's needed here. The Google thing, it seems like somebody made a mistake, and if you ever do that again, you should really figure out what the costs are before you let Google or LinkedIn or Facebook down here at that price for wear and tear. Thank you.
Again, I would make a motion that we table this until we all feel more comfortable with the costs that have been presented here today. Can I have a second?
Second.
Well, I'd like to amend that I think that we should, if we're going to table it, we should put a hard date that the numbers get revised and brought back within the next 30 days, because really, if we're gonna do any bookings here, and if the numbers are close to being accurate, you know, I think we should be moving ahead. So it would be good if we could get some verification, and I know that, you know, we're a little short in the finance organization right now, but if we can get these numbers back to us to make a decision at the next council meeting, and make a final vote with your recommendation on perhaps limiting sizes or whatever else that addresses some of the comments that are here. I think it would be prudent, because we can't keep kicking the can down the road.
Yeah, we also have to remember the people who did the study with regard to all of our fees were the ones who stated that the fees that we are presently asking are the most that we can ask under the law. So we don't have a lot of discretion with regard to raising those fees, supposedly.
Actually,
That's
Mr.
not
Mayor,
true.
this is one of the few areas where
That's not
Proposition
true.
26 gives us total
We can,
discretion
yes, yeah.
with respect to fees.
Yeah.
It's not cost recovery,
Absolutely.
because this is like a proprietary operation. We can rent this facility for as much money as you can get on the market.
Yeah.
Wonderful, because that isn't what we were
That
told.
was
Yeah.
Proposition 26 specifically allows for the rental of facilities to be without limitation based on cost recovery.
Okay, and if we could have some source as to where these numbers came from and what they include in various years, beyond the 1 year, go back as far 2-3 years as to what the costs were and what it includes.
With all due respect, Councilmember McKeithen, I think going back a year is kind of more real time than going back 5 or 7 years. I think
I
the
didn't say
staff has done a really good job. I think that there are other motives why certain council members are not wanting to move forward with the continuing the bookings in the park. And I don't think we should table it. I think that staff has done the work. And I think that in a business proposition, you know, maybe it's not $90,000, maybe it's $50,000. It's more than we have now. And so I really think that we should move forward with this.
I did not say 5 or 7, I said 2 or 3.
Mr. Mayor, just a point of clarification here. Councilmember Whitmer made an amendment to the motion.
Right.
There's supposed to be no other discussion or debate until it's either seconded or the chair decides that it dies for lack of a second.
I will second.
And then then that part is, the only discussion is on the amendment only, and it has to be taken before you discuss the rest of the
All
motion.
right, well, I will now take a vote on the amendment.
Would you
Table
repeat
for
it?
1 month?
Would you repeat?
Table for 1 month. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
First,
Opposed?
Continue for 1 month, Mr. Mayor.
Continue for 1 month.
Opposed?
All right.
Were public comments closed?
Yes.
Okay, then we will now, that's the end of the normal agenda. We'll now go to the items that were pulled by the
Excuse
council.
me, that is not the end of the normal agenda, because we have item number 21, which is council reports.
Yeah,
And I do have a council report that I'd like to make orally.
do you want to comment on your council report?
Yes,
Okay, that's fine. We normally just let people read.
right. Well, I didn't have it submitted. I just want to make an announcement that the Town Center Task Force is hoping to make their recommendation of the architect choice to council at the January 2012 meeting. And what we would like to further ask the city manager, who's not here, but the interim acting city manager, to direct staff to develop the framework for moving forward and identifying next steps. And just to announce that the next public meeting of the Town Center Task Force is scheduled for December 1st at 10 a.m. and everyone is invited to that meeting.
Okay, thank you. And the other council reports are in the agenda. We'll now go to item number 9, Bill.
Okay. And I did bring this up earlier in a discussion with the chief. Down in the check registers on page 16 of 17, On page, check number 13078, there are actually the purchases of 2 cars, which are actually the same 2 cars that we're asking permission to buy tonight. And they've already been bought, and the chief and I have had a good discussion on that, and I think we are all very understanding, but I want to make sure that we understand that, two things. First off, we do have the $15,000 limit that's identified in our purchasing policy that we currently have on the books, 13.16, I believe it is. And then it also appears that there may be some confusion on how to move forward, because there's actually 2 purchasing policies we have, and that we need to move forward and get one single purchasing policy and make sure the town is properly aware of acquisition policies, and that we don't make this mistake again of buying something before we actually have proof to do so. And I think that, again, Chief and I had a great conversation on it, and I think that he's in full agreement.
Okay,
So thank you for that.
I move we accept item number 8.
Okay.
9, excuse me, 9.
Item number 8, I'll
9.
second.
9.
Item number 9, I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. We then go to item number 8, which is Jerry's. Sorry, Judy.
We already did that one.
Okay, all right. And then we go to number 12.
I pulled this because I see that there is an option to lease this equipment, but I couldn't figure out, based upon these base payments, what the actual cost of the lease was going to be.
Councilmember McKeithen, I think in the staff report there, if you just look at the numbers, you'll see that by leasing it, although we don't have the upfront cost immediately, each bike will run us somewhere in the neighborhood of about $4,500 more over the length of the lease. The other problem is we don't know what the